Good morning. Hey, Lexi, I have a question for you. Do you know what a hero is? You know what a superhero is? Do you know any? Superman? Yeah, that's a superhero. Well, today I wanted to talk to you all about heroes, not necessarily superheroes, because, and I'm going to tell you about somebody you've probably never heard of before, but you might hear of him more as you grow up. I think our world is definitely in need of heroes. Would you agree? Especially for our young people, a good role model, a truly good hero, but for all of us. And I think kind of over the past few years, our society has almost come to worship the anti-hero, the bad guy, if you will. And I'm not sure I know the answer completely as to why that might be, but it could possibly be because as a culture, we're almost afraid to say what's right and what's wrong. So if somebody has a lot of strength or a lot of power, that can't really be good because it could be a potential for evil or, really good football player, but there's just something dark lurking in the back somewhere. So I think it goes without saying, and when we find somebody, either in our present day or from history, that was truly good, not perfect, because no one's perfect except God, but that was truly good and really a success, that we really should look at their lives and see what it was or is that makes them successful. Could you play a little bit of that music for me? Or however you want to do it. Full disclosure, Gerard and Jarrell, I already know my lesson because we read about this individual this week, but I found his life so inspiring that I wanted to share it with you all. But does that music make any of you all, besides Gerard and Jarrell, think of anybody in particular? It's from the movie Chariots of Fire, and that movie is about Liddell. And that's who I want to talk about today, and maybe the boys can help me if I miss anything, or I want to talk about why he's remembered today. And I would submit to you that it's not because he broke the 1924 world record for the 400-meter race in the Olympics that was held in Paris that year, but rather because of what he did that was so outstanding. If you all remember, he was a very well-known young man in Scotland. He was born in China. His parents were missionaries, and they would send him and his older brother back to Scotland to go to school. And before long, it became apparent that he was a really gifted athlete. And into his high school and college years, he became well known for being the fastest runner on the planet. And so as the 1924 Olympics loomed on the horizon in Paris, Scotland had never won any medal at all at the Olympics, and they knew that their Eric Liddell could win the 100-meter race. He was absolutely the fastest. Nobody could even come close to his record. But what they didn't know was that when the schedule of events came out, the 100-meter race was scheduled for a Sunday, and Eric refused to run on a Sunday. Now, maybe there wouldn't have been anything wrong with that, but he was a young man who loved God, and he wanted to please him with his life, and his conviction was that Sunday was a day for rest and worship. And so I don't think it's because he won got the gold medal for Scotland in 1924, but I think it's because he held to his convictions that we remember him. Because if I ask any of you all who another Olympic winner was from 1924, I don't think you'd remember. Or 1928. I doubt you could just say somebody off the top of your head. But anyway, so to make a long story short, he was leading up to this. he's a somewhat shy, reserved young man, and he was a gentleman. He always shook his opponent's hands before a race would start. And he knew that God had given him an ability to run, but he didn't know for what purpose. He couldn't understand why that would have any eternal value whatsoever, until he was invited to speak to a group of coal miners. And an evangelical college group was trying to reach out to this coal mining village, and nobody would come. Nobody was interested in hearing about God or religion or anything like that. But one of them got the idea, what if we invited Eric Liddell to come and speak? And it's just like it clicked with him. All of a sudden he realized, this gift I've been given, I can use for God's purpose. So even though he's shy and reserved, didn't consider himself a good speaker, he went and he spoke in a very simple and sincere way about his faith. And it worked. The coal miners were interested, and they listened. And many, many speaking engagements after that he would do in a simple, sincere way. He would just share his faith in God. And he had that avenue specifically because he was so well known for his running. So back to the Olympics, as you can imagine, when he said he wasn't going to run on a Sunday, the British Olympic Committee, people were not happy about it whatsoever. And so they tried a number of things. They said he was just taking this thing too far. First, there was no real problem with running on a Sunday. His heat would take place in the morning in the afternoon, and he would have enough time to go to church in the morning and still be there. But to him, it was about a principle, and it was about a day of rest and worship, so he wouldn't agree to it. Second, they pointed out that the continental Sabbath lasted only till noon, and he said, mine lasts all day. And then third, they tried to get the International Olympic Committee to move the 100-meter to another day, but that appeal was denied. So there's nothing that Scotland can do because this young man will not change his mind. And he started instead preparing for the 200 and 400-meter races. But they didn't have much hope because Eric is a 100-meter runner, and the 400 meters like a quarter of a mile, and just, he wasn't as good at that because it was more of a long distance. Nevertheless, he began to train, and when the day arrived at the Olympics, everything was stacked against Eric. He had already run 2 races earlier that day, and he had won a bronze, by the way, in one of those. And in a semifinal heat for the 400 meter the day before, the American Horatio Fitch had set a new world record. And to put the final nail in the coffin, Eric, when they got their positions, he was in the outside lane, which means that you cannot see your opponents because you're the first one out of the gate and you can't tell their pace. And so just as people thought Eric started out way too fast, but something happened right before he took off running. Someone from his home country handed him a note, and it says in the old book that he who honors me, I will honor. And apparently that really inspired Eric because by all rights he should have collapsed on the track, but in an almost supernatural, unbelievable way, he kept up the speed the whole time. And needless to say, you all know he won the gold record for the 400 meter. And not that long ago, a couple years ago, a New York Times writer wrote that the charitable aspect of the Christian faith is at odds with the killer instinct needed to win in athletic competition. So much so that serious faith is basically a hindrance to victory. But I think we can see from Eric's example, his classic example, that not only was it not a hindrance, but it actually helped him win that day. Eric's daughter, Patricia, many years later, she wrote, I truly believe that had he run on Sunday and sold out to his principles, he would not have won. He would have not had the fire because he was running for God. And so again, I submit to you all that it's not because Eric won the gold medal. That's not why the movie was made about him. It was because no matter the pressure, no matter the fame and glory that he gave up, winning a gold medal for his country, all of that he compared as just small dust to remaining true to his principles. And so unbelievably, the second half of Eric's life was just as exciting as the first half. I don't know if you all know, but right after that, he quit running. People didn't want him to, but he did. And he went to be a missionary in China, following his parents' example. He had a wife and 3 little girls, and as World War II approached, the Japanese began to come in to where he was in China, and eventually they rounded up all the foreigners, including Eric, and sent them to an internment camp, a Japanese internment camp. And as you can imagine, it was really hard on Eric. There were, I think, was it 200 to 300 people in this one small place? And at first they all got along beautifully, but after about a year or so, they kind of started to, it was just hard. But Eric wasn't one to sit on the sidelines and do nothing. Even there, he was very involved. He was known as Uncle Eric to the children. He would organize games. He would still try to teach people to read and do all of these things. And there were 3 things that happened there that really, really stood out to me. And I think that they will show you more of Eric's character. There was a young lady that tells about a hockey game that the children were playing on a Sunday in the camp, and a fight broke out. And Eric agreed that the next Sunday he would referee the game. And she said that Eric came to the feeling that a need existed, and it was the Christ-like thing to do to let them play with the equipment and to be with them, because it was more Christ-like to do it than to follow the letter of the law and let them run amok by themselves. And to this young lady, that was pretty interesting, because that's what everybody knew him for, that he wouldn't run on a Sunday. But in this case, he felt like it was more important to help the children than to not do anything on Sunday. And then there was a 17-year-old in the camp that he noticed his shoes were completely worn out. And so one day Eric came to him and he said, "Steve, I see that you have no shoes and it's winter. Perhaps you can use these." And so he shoved a bundle into Steve's hands, and it was Eric's running shoes. And we can only imagine that these shoes were a historic, something he was saving as an icon of past victories. But in this case, the practicality that this young man needed shoes was more important to him than any sentimental value. And the third thing was, well, he died at age 33 while he was still in the 43 while he was still in the camp. People noticed that something was wrong. He began to lose vigor and just wasn't himself, and it was found out he had an inoperable brain tumor, and he died shortly thereafter, very quickly. But 63 years after Eric's death, just before the Beijing Olympic Games, the Chinese government revealed something that even Eric's family didn't know. And that was that Eric had been included in a prisoner exchange between Japan and Britain, but he had given that up to a pregnant lady, and they had never known it till 63 years later. He could have gone back home to be with his wife and children. Anyway, I think that we can say with certainty that Eric's life is worth modeling, and that the reason it is because the way he lived was centered around God and his relationship with him, and that he was unwilling to compromise his principles, no matter how many people laughed at him, no matter what it meant he might cost, what it might cost him. And to me, that's what makes him a hero, and that's why he's worth remembering. And so I hope you all will find that Eric is someone that you could truly model your life after. And I thank you for listening.